There are 1,000,000 ways to die. We just wanna talk about it. Codeheads.
Welcome back to Codeheads.
Welcome.
Here we are, all of our Codehead fans. Today we are going to hit mechanical CPR part 2.
Very excited about that.
Yep.
Before we begin, what'd you do this weekend?
I was actually, thanks for asking. I was actually out at a cardiac arrest survival summit, so a big resuscitation conference, which was awesome. And I did a couple talks on mechanical CPR, actually.
Oh, wow. So it's really fresh, top of mind.
It really is fresh right here.
Great.
Right here.
That's great.
There were a lot of chats about it, a lot of scuttlebutt about the AHA guideline changes and mechanical CPR and DSED and best
Wow.
practices, all sorts of good stuff.
That's
Yeah.
great. Timely. That's great.
Yeah, and it was really like a Codehead nerd session. It was like everything was code.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And I think where we last left off with talking about mechanical CPRs, we talked about like the good, the bad, and whatnot. But we didn't really talk about the bad, maybe a little bit. But what we did not talk about really was the research, and that's what whenever people talk about anything within science and the medical world and resuscitation, they're like, oh, well, I'm not going to change my practice unless you show me the data. And so that's where, unfortunately, things go a little bit awry with mechanical CPR, because the data, it's not necessarily in line with our favor to say yes, just like the DSED, the double sequential, as we talked about. It's not like a falling out of the sky, green light. Yes, it's so much better than mechanical or manual CPR, but
Right.
that's why I want to talk about it and kind of get into it.
Mm-hmm.
And there are really 4 most notable studies on mechanical CPR. And a couple are focused on utilizing, as we talked last time, that there are a couple different types of devices. So there's really 2 on each different type of device. The band device,
Right.
and then also the piston style. And I'm just gonna go by years, I guess. So there was a Circ trial in 2014. So it feels like the Wayback Machine. And the Circ style was kind of an unblinded, randomized trial. It was in the US and the UK, which is kind of cool because it was on both sides of the pond, really focusing on out of hospital cardiac arrest. There were like 522 participants in that trial. There were originally 5,000 enrolled, but then a lot got excluded. Yeah, which is kind of a bummer. But it did show a really abnormally high quality of CPR in the study. That study was really focusing on rate and use of high quality CPR. And it showed that manual had a great, their manual compressions in that study showed that they did great with rate, like nailed it. However, they weren't looking at depth of compression because they had no way to really look at that.
Were they looking at all chest compression fraction?
Well, they couldn't get the compression depth for the manual CPR, so they couldn't really do the compression.
Okay.
But and they also didn't really look at neurological outcomes, so it was really just straight up looking at CPR. But what they did find was that mechanical CPR was statistically equivalent survival as manual CPR in out of hospital cardiac arrest. So despite just looking at rate, it was very similar. So I want people to take that with a grain of salt, because
Big grain.
yeah, well, a few grains, because they were really looking at that high quality CPR that they were doing manually. They had a coach, they had a metronome, they had
Right.
someone like watching and like really driving that person who was doing the manual CPR, which is not the norm, right?
No.
So it was heavily coached. then there was the Link study that was also in 2014, again, focused on out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. And they looked at, a little bit different. That was randomized. That was in the EU only. And they had around like just shy of 600 participants in that one. And they looked at mechanical, obviously, versus manual, and they were looking really at a 4-hour survival for out of hospital. And again, they found no significant difference. So between manual CPR and the mechanical CPR. So it was like 23.6% versus 23.7%. Truly no significant difference.
Right.
And then, I was really had high hopes for this paramedic trial, and that was a cluster randomized trial, and that was in 2015. They had like 4,500, just shy of that. It was like 4,470 some odd patients, and it was out of hospital. So OCA's in the UK, and they looked at either manual compressions or using actually the piston device, so the Lucas device. And they did it based on what the first truck to arrive had on it. So if the first truck to arrive to an out of hospital cardiac arrest had Lucas on it, they used it. And if not, they went to manual. And so 60% of the patients did get mechanical CPR. However, they weren't, whilst they were really trained, they did have some like device issues, maybe placing it because the team wasn't like super comfortable with it. So it wasn't the best trial, but they saw with out of hospital cardiac arrest that there was no improvement in 30-day survival with manual versus mechanical CPR.
Right.
So it was like a 6% versus 7%. So again, no real difference. And I had all sorts of faith in the 2021 compress RCT trial. And that was a multi-center randomized control trial in the UK focusing on adult in-hospital cardiac arrest. So that was the first in-hospital trial with mechanical CPR. And so they, obviously wanted to focus on patients that were in a non-shockable rhythm because they needed the longest continuous compressions, right? And so they randomized it in like a 3-to-1 ratio to receive mechanical CPR versus manual. Only 127 participants. And it was super, super small because they were trying to kind of like blind it for, funding of the devices and, the time limitations and whatnot. But the biggest issue was that when the in-hospital cardiac arrests occurred and the trained clinicians that they had that were able to deploy the device. So they didn't train like we did in our hospital, like as soon as we got all of our devices, we trained all the clinicians and like had a large body of clinicians that were ready and felt comfortable with it. They only had like a handful. And two of them had to be on site at all times to be able to place the device and utilize it because they were the super users. And so it was hard to have 24/7 coverage with only like 7 providers for a whole hospital and only including non-shockable rhythms. So they kind of shot themselves in the foot there. But for in-hospital cardiac arrest, they found it was indeterminate. No difference.
Can you just go back a second? You said it was solely utilized for if they were non-shockable?
Correct. I don't know why.
No. Okay. We'll talk about that. But
yeah, they should have done it for all to just get a wider.
Because they should have shocked. They could have shocked while compressions were active.
Absolutely.
That's massive.
Absolutely. Yes, I think they just wanted to do that because of like manual compressions are longer. It's a longer time that you would be doing manual compressions in a PE, a non-shockable rhythm.
Yes.
But again, so it showed no difference. So what my takeaway is from all this research is it's not, none of the research shows that mechanical CPR does damage, right? None of them showed
That's
any
big.
major flaws that there's damage happening to patients, right?
Right.
Because any of the injuries that happen with mechanical CPR are at the same rate as the damage that has occurred from manual, right? Like,
And that's significant to recognize because that is a routine argument against mechanical CPR
yeah,
trauma.
oh, cracked ribs. Well, so did your
I've
like
tracked
lower
plenty.
part of that. Correct. Same.
I've done damage. You have to do damage to resuscitate. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it happens.
Hmm.
And, mechanical CPR, my takeaway from all the research is that mechanical CPR is the same as optimized high quality manual compressions. And
Agreed.
that doesn't happen often. That means you need someone specifically coaching. You need a feedback device like end-tidal CO2 that is driving how you're doing your compressions. Like, it has to be such a focus, which there are some places that have that down, and that's great,
It, yeah.
but that's not the standard.
That's an ideal situation that is not a constant, as you just said. And that makes me think of, the HA videos, which I do really like, but you will see a really controlled, quiet environment, a laboratory setting almost where there is that coach, there is that, communication. Someone is sitting there analyzing the compressions. Pre-hospital, that does not happen often. Like, we are monitoring other people, but if there's just two of us, I'm doing something else while they're doing compressions. I can't necessarily see what they are doing. And even in hospital, it does not look like that. So yes, you are talking about a perfect, situation. Perfect.
Correct.
So yes, we could optimize them and maybe they can compete with mechanical, but otherwise, I don't think they do. That's my opinion. I know they don't.
Right. And I'm, from my experience in vast experience in in-hospital cardiac arrest, people get distracted. It even happens to me when I'm doing manual CPR and I hear
Yeah.
someone say, "Oh, I can't find the epi," or and I'm like, "Oh, drawer two." I'm, you lose focus. That's just what happens. And, you need someone being like, "Hey, push in harder," or like, "Hey, you're not fully releasing on the top of the chest." Like, you need to have someone actually coaching you to have it perfect, and use end-tidal CO2. Anything that's really external, like, the puck that people use, it's telling you how deep you're going, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're compressing the patient's chest optimally, like that you're getting the squeeze out of their heart. Like, the only thing that really gives you the feedback for your compressions is end-tidal CO2.
Right. Real time.
I would love to see a study on manual compressions versus mechanical, just watching the biofeedback, watching end-tidal
Absolutely.
rates.
Yep,
And
I would
that,
as well. And even, okay, you have coaching in place, you have everything, we are monitoring the compressions, eyes are on them. However, we are, that requires you need to make an adjustment here. You didn't go deep enough on that one. You had, two compressions ago, they weren't good. Your rate was not appropriate. I don't have to coach the mechanical CPR device.
correct.
There's no delay, and you are not, you are going to compression efficacy will suffer because if I coached you because you did something wrong on one compression, okay, that decreased, optimization, and that, like, again, that will not happen with a mechanical device. I'm not going to say you didn't just go 2 inches, you are going too fast, you're pushing way too hard, etc. So that alleviates the need, first of all, for a coach, and we could utilize that person as another resource,
Yeah.
right? We got plenty to do. We don't need someone just standing there and monitoring the compressions. So again, we are freeing up, critical need, the resources that we require. We free that person up. That's just another way of thinking about it.
For sure. Because we do need, it is an all hands on deck sort of situation. And having a device take that, the onus and that mental load off of us to be able to just know that we're getting optimized compressions and we can focus on other things going on with the patient. Because it's not, every arrest is not a one size fits all. There's always
Yep.
nuances. There's always those weird little, things that we need to focus on. And it's a heavy mental load, which we don't, often talk about for that code team leader that like everyone's staring at them like, yes, leader, what's next?
Right.
And it's like,
Right.
that's a lot of pressure that they're like, oh, am I missing something? And, and that's why we do team training. But
Right.
that's what we need to do team training with our Lucas device, right? So everyone gets comfortable, everyone gets comfortable with the placement. And let's get real, you're always going to be doing manual CPR first.
A
Like,
hundred
you're
percent.
going to arrive and you're gonna jump on the chest with your hands. No one's gonna be like, "Oh, hold on. We're not gonna do compressions. I know that they need them, but let's get that mechanical CPR device."
No.
And
And I think that is an argument made, and I think that's the concern on the side of the AHA, because it's almost like if we're focusing on getting that on and waiting to do it, that means there's an insinuation that that means hands are off the chest, but it's not the case. And we always say, if there's any interruption, if the device, we can't fit it and we're fooling around or sheets are getting stuck, no, it's gone. Right.
yeah,
We know the priority. We all know the priority. So if
right.
that's interrupting the compressions, we don't use it. Okay. It's like you said, it's situational. Every code really is different.
And it's just like we said with the double sequential, right? If you're doing it, if you have mechanical CPR devices and you are using them and they are working with your team because you're all trained, it's not delaying, you're not having these enormous hands-off times, it's not delaying patient care, it's not delaying compressions, then use it. It's not doing any harm. Um, you know, but since and the guidelines, quite frankly, didn't really change all that much from last time.
No.
But the big difference is that for some reason now, people are getting rid of their fleets of devices because, oh, it's not, they're not recommending it. Well, they can't recommend something until like the data is really like there, but I just don't think we're ever gonna get, a true like mic drop kind of data because we're always gonna have a mixed method. You're always gonna be doing manual compressions and then starting mechanical. So you can never have like clean data saying, oh, the the neurological outcome's so much better with mechanical because it's going to be a mixed model every time.
Correct. Right. It's just again, when you are utilizing these devices actually in the field, in hospital, and then you read a guideline like that totally contradicts with the success rates you've had as a result of implementing these interventions. That's why we all get a little edgy, you know? And I
Yeah.
really, whenever you state that, whenever they say people getting rid of the mechanical devices, it just makes me shiver. Like I visualize them actually leaving the facility, and I just, it's like, give them to me. I'll take it. I'll have one at home, you know?
For sure. Because, the other thing is that, not that it's been in any of the studies or whatever, but like there are a lot of folks in healthcare that are aging, right? We are
Oh,
not spring chickens and it's hard work to do good compressions. And,
great point.
you know, it's these devices. I think that if we look over time, that places that use them continuously will have less injuries from doing compressions because we're letting a machine do it.
Absolutely. And also, just to say, in the field, it's impossible. It was impossible for me to routinely have perfect form. It doesn't work that way. I'm I'm crammed into a corner. I'm going even down the stairs. Like, I definitely, incurred injury. Whether it's a thrown out back, whether it's like a shoulder, whatever, it happens. And then if I'm injured, I can't do good CPR,
Correct.
right?
My other follow-up is, when patients are in the cath lab, like
Ooh,
when people come,
DCI.
yep, they need to go into cath lab, have PCI, you can leave a mechanical device on
How
and
great is that?
whilst so they can have good compressions whilst, having their intervention as opposed to someone kind of arcing and kind of pretending to do compressions in some weird
Yeah.
angle
Yeah.
and possibly injuring themselves and
Right.
or not giving good compressions until we open up the vessels,
It's
and
so
that's
great.
one of the huge benefits,
Huge.
is to be able to like give that continued care that a human can't, do by themselves and not expose them to extra radiation and all that other jazz, and really optimize patient care. and open up those vessels, get that blood flowing, because that's what it's about. Um, so I guess my kind of closing questions for our fellow codes heads is like, do you use mechanical CPR? Do you like it? Do you hate it? And, have you had any of the issues with it? Have you had issues, whether it's with training or anything else? Because we want to kind of hear other people's thoughts. Obviously, we are biased.
We're clearly advocates,
We are huge.
aggressive advocates. You know,
Um, yeah,
the
but
research be damned.
well, correct. Yeah, it's another time that I'm kind of, I usually use Emma show me the data, but
Yeah, you are. Definitely.
now it's not fitting my agenda with DSAT and with this. So
I'd also be curious if anyone, utilizes different types of devices and
yep.
what their, opinion is on them or the experience that they had, if there was any, any difference. I know for a fact the one I utilized was a band device, and it's changed, but 10 years ago they were very heavy, very, very heavy.
Yep.
And that, that contributed to some people's, that dissuaded them to utilize it, because just carrying it up, say 6 flights. So right there, I'd like to hear things like that, people's, specific reactions to each one, what they liked, what they didn't like, everything like that, just so it gives a more, informed, a more informed opinion with each device.
Yeah, hit us with it, because we want
And
to hear like what other barriers are. I mean, I think I hear them all when I go and I speak, nationally, and I work with different people, but there's things that I miss and I don't hear about. So yeah, hit us with it, because we'd love to hear more. And I'd love to have someone disagree with me.
Same.
All right. Well, on that note, to all of our code heads,
There are 1 million ways to die. We just wanna talk